So, hello everybody. Hello everyone in the room. Hello everybody on screen. We're really delighted to continue our all through the year series of writing Jewish women's lives. Vera Fine-Grodzinski is the fiction and the inspiration behind the series, and so there is nobody better to host today than Vera herself. And we're really delighted to have Emily Kopley with us all the way from Canada. I will leave it to Vera to introduce her properly. But Emily, thank you very much. Vera, thank you very much. There'll be opportunities for questions once Emily is spoken. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I intend to. Thank you.
We are delighted, I'm repeating what Kate already said. We are delighted to welcome Emily Kopley today to the Oxford Centre of Life Writing, and particularly to the Oxford Centre's new program on writing Jewish women's lives. She has travelled all the way from Montreal, where she's a faculty member at McGill University. In a way, Emily could have had a double invitation because she works in two overlapping fields, which are of great interest to Wolfson College in particular, because she is, Emily is a Virginia Woolf scholar, has widely published on Virginia Woolf, and is recognized as a Virginia Woolf scholar, which of course we know her mother was her first biography, so there's that connection. The other reason, in fact, the main reason she's here is not because of Virginia Woolf, but because she teaches, writes and researches, publishes in Jewish studies, having published in 2015 on the messianic idea of Judaism. Her Jewish interest articles have appeared in Studies in American Literature and in the American Jewish Review, the American Jewish Studies Review. She has published in the Times Literary Supplement and in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Besides teaching in Jewish studies at McGill, she also there where she teaches courses on Holocaust memoirs, Jewish American literature, and Jewish children's literature. In the past, Emily has been invited to give talks at the University of Toronto in Canada, at Harvard University in the US, and she's spoken at Haifa University in Israel, and she has also spoken in Oxford before. She also speaks at Beyond Academia and is often invited to cultural and community centers in her town and further afield. She's a recipient, Emily is a recipient of many scholarly grants, but today I'm only going to mention the few, which is the Mellon and Robert Silver's Foundation in the US, and the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec in Canada. Today, Emily will be speaking about her maternal grandmother, Berta Golahny, about her art and her life and how the two are interlinked. Just to set the scene, Berta Golahny was born in the US in 1925 and died in 2005. So Emily remembers their close relationship well and addresses her Jewish identity, not only as her granddaughter, but also as a scholar of Jewish studies. In the wider context, Golahny's work is in private collections in the US, as in many different places. I'm only going to mention a few: at the Met in New York, at Vassar College, at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and at the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Montréal in Montreal, as well as the Folk Art Museum at Harvard University of Harvard. Please welcome Emily, who's come all the way from Montreal, and she's the first of our three speakers in this term. Without further ado,
she said not to do about like thing online.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm very delighted to speak today. And excuse me, thank you, Vera, for that wonderful introduction and for sponsoring this series. Thank you, Michelle, who suggested this whole thing. Kate, for facilitating it. Kate. Alice, for your help in organizing. And all of you for being here. And also, I'd like to thank my home institution, the McGill Department of Jewish Studies, and the union to which I belong, the McGill Course Lecturers and Instructors Union, both of which are supporting my being here. So I want to tell you, first of all, that this talk doesn't quite match the abstract. I thought that creation and destruction might be too big a theme for a talk. Therefore, I'm going to talk about time. And I want to tell you the motivation behind this talk, which is that I'm at the start of a book project on my maternal grandmother's art, and I'm trying to figure out how to organize it. My family has a large archive from which I'm drawing. I have diaries, letters, family papers, photo albums, and of course much of the art itself. But I do not plan to write an exhaustive biography. I want to write a sort of episodic biography tied to the art. And I'm searching for a structure that is both chronological and looser, that allows me to move back and forth and show continuity as well as development. And so it is in search of such a structure that I'm trying out for you today, a possible structure, and you'll tell me what you think. I also want to say that this talk is not specifically about the art of my grandmother that is on Jewish history and Jewish concerns, although she did also pursue much art on that, and I talk about it a bit at the end. But that is a different talk that this could have been, and I'll say more at the end, as I said. Okay. So my talk is called, can you all see? Yeah. My talk is called Befriending Time, the Life and Art of Berta Rosenbaum Golahny. And this is a self-portrait. It's called Portrait of the Artist. It's a wood engraving from 1970, and it's held at the Boston Athenaeum. Okay. Some of you know me as a scholar of Virginia Woolf.
Just I'm afraid it's not advancing on the.
Oh, we have to share the screen somehow.
Let me undo it and do it again.
Oh, okay.
It is sharing, but it's not advancing, so I'll just stop sharing and share. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. But I'll see. Especially wait.
Okay, not changing for the people's abroad, but we're not changing for us.
This to do with this. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
better.
One more time. First time, lucky everybody. Where is it? I don't know what's going on with this. Tell you what, that's working for both streams. I'm not going to risk making it to green. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Sorry
very
for the
good.
interruption.
That's okay. That's very good. Okay. And where is the camera, by the way, Alice? Where am I looking if I'm looking?
Out on the table.
Out on the table.
It's looking
Okay.
at you. Don't
It's
worry.
look- oh, okay.
It picks you up.
Okay. Hello to everybody on Zoom. Hello. Okay.
Cool.
Okay. That's my book. Okay, so some of you know me as a Wolf scholar. And I have been writing on Wolf for 20 years when certain sentences started mocking me. Tiny Popeyes, you know, Popeye the Sailor Man, tiny Popeyes smashed tiny 2x4s on my head. Wham! We think back through our mothers if we are women. Bonk! A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write. Tiny stars ringed my brow. Not pain, but embarrassment. These lines from A Room of One's Own are so well known as to be cliches. They are often all someone knows of Woolf's work. I had written in my book, Virginia Woolf and Poetry, which is published by OUP, another reason I'm so pleased to be here. I had written in my book about the layers beneath these lines. The sentence about mothers, thinking back to our mothers, actually echoes literary fathers, in particular Virgil and Arthur Quiller Couch. Woolf is adapting their language. And the specific sum of money that Woolf says a woman writer must have, £500 a year, seems based in part on the minimum amount that T.S. Eliot was willing to accept as an annuity from his friends, Woolf among them. But Popeye did not care about these details. He made sure I could hear again the force of Woolf's surface meaning. We think back to our mothers, money in a room. With all the subtlety that a smashing plank affords, Popeye pointed out that Woolf was addressing me. In the 20 years in which I had been writing on Woolf, certain things had happened to me to provoke Popeye's violence. The most significant is that I had become a mother. Questions of money and a room preoccupied me. And even more, questions of money's greatest purchase, time. And again, I am embarrassed by cliche. I worried about time. I worry about time. My worry about time is common. My model of a mother artist is not. That's baby me with my maternal grandmother, and that is a painting of me. Oh, I see, we can't hide the Zoom people to see the slide. Well, anyway, to see the whole slide. That's a painting of me. It's called Emily with Book. It's also called Emily at 14, but I can tell you I was not 14, I was 13, and the reason I'm sure is that this dress got me through every bar and bat mitzvah when I was 12 and 13, and then I outgrew it, so I'm not 14. Can anyone tell just from this painting what the book is that I'm holding?
It's a Norton.
It's not a Norton,
It's not Norton, okay.
and it's not Wolf, but it is a famous book cover, some of you might know. It's A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. Okay. And it is only in putting together this presentation that I realized why my grandmother might have been attracted to the book that I was reading, given the title, A Wrinkle in Time. She was interested in time. That's what I'm going to talk about. Berta Rosenbaum Golahny was an American Jewish artist who lived from 1925 to 2005. She was, as you know, also my maternal grandmother. Her paintings, prints, and sculptures filled my childhood. They were large and vivid and abundant in her home, in my parents' home, and in my mind. This art provided an education. From it, I learned about the Holocaust, the nuclear bomb, the Korean War. I learned about Helen Keller, Louis Armstrong, Paul Robeson, Albert Einstein, Jean Sibelius. I learned about the Big Bang and names of various nebulae. I learned from titles of some of the work, bits of poetry by William Blake and Dylan Thomas, and passages of the biblical Psalms. And I learned information that is less concrete. This art provided a standard of artistic possibility and of moral possibility. Today, Golahny's art is in several permanent collections, but is not widely known. At once accessible and weighty, this art communicates a coherent, ennobling vision of the place of humanity in the universe. It is beautiful and memorable and moving. It should be shared and seen. I called my grandmother Birdie, as did everyone who knew her. So I will call her Bertie in this talk. One of the artists Bertie admired was Max Beckmann. Beckmann's granddaughter, Mayen, said in an interview about her grandfather, "When you grow up with his paintings, you've been brainwashed by the time you're 20, so that you're basically only able to see by means of the pictures." The word brainwashed is pejorative. I might not use that word, but the point stands. This is absolutely my experience. Bertie died when I was 21. Her death revealed to me that my personal geometry was not widely known. I seemed to look up as I do after reading Shakespeare or Virginia Woolf or another Woolf I love, Thomas Wolfe, when I think, how come not everyone is reading this right now? What is everyone doing? Do they know about this? Among the less concrete pieces of information I have gathered from Bertie's art is an attitude towards time. She regarded time with patient fascination and engagement. It is this resourceful attitude of which I have been reminding myself and which I'd like to explore in this talk. When I began my dissertation, which became my book, organization initially eluded me. One of my advisors is here, Hannah Sullivan. So nice to see you, Hannah. Another one of my advisors, Nick Jenkins, a scholar of W.H. Auden, gave me this good advice: make chronology your friend. I liked the phrase, friendly and memorable, because of its rhythm. Trochaic tetrameter, make chronology your friend. One foot after another in clear sequence, it performed its own meaning. I took Nick's advice. Virginia Woolf in poetry has a biographical structure. I traced Woolf's views on poetry over her lifetime, showing how they informed her work at every stage. Making chronology my friend is helpful now too, as I plan a book on Bertie's art. But of course, keeping chronology too close can feel like you're stuck in a long obstacle course, relentlessly training your eye on the subsequent challenge and the one after that. And highlighting sequence can obscure continuities. Still, chronology provides a friendly frame, and I'll now give you a brief chronology of Bertie's life. These are her parents. Bertie was born Berta Rosenbaum in Detroit, Michigan, to Gad and Fanny Rosenbaum, Jews who had immigrated from Eastern Europe. In Poland, Gad had trained as a locksmith, and in America, he expanded his knowledge of ironwork and eventually established his own ironworks factory and was responsible for making staircases and railings and doors. He also made tables and fire screens. When Fanny arrived on her own as an orphan, as a teenager, to New York City and worked as a needle worker and was active in workers' rights. In Detroit, she helped orphans and organized Yiddish reading circles for women. These were, in Yiddish, we say Laienpreisen. These were sort of like book groups. They would, the women, it was a very rich cultural program of reading Yiddish literature and often inviting the writers to visit. They would visit Gad and Fanny's homes. They were the hosts. And Gad and Fanny were concerned with social justice. They were particularly active in Arbiter Ring, that is workmen's circle. And they passed this interest in social justice onto their children, including Bertie. It is an interest manifest in Bertie's art. There we go. Gad and Fanny encouraged Bertie in her art in word and in deed. Here you see the first easel of Bertie's made by her father from wrought iron. And on the right, you see a photo of the directors of the Detroit Women's Yiddish Reading Circles. My great-grandmother, Fanny, is in the middle. I'll point her out. Berta began studying art at age 8 at the Jewish Community Center of Detroit. She studied at Detroit's Cass Technical High School and received a National Scholastic Scholarship to attend the Art Students League in New York City, where she was from 1943 to 1944. Then she studied at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and at the University of Iowa, where in particular she studied printmaking. In the summer of 1948, she met my grandfather, Yuda Golahny, an engineering student who had recently come to America. Yuda was born in Latvia and had emigrated with his family to Mandate, Palestine in 1933. The two married in 1949. When Yuda was admitted to MIT, the couple moved to the Boston area where they remained, and they raised 2 children. Berta exhibited locally and nationally, and for many decades, she taught painting at the Cambridge Center for Adult Education. Oh, I missed here. Here are photos from the Art Students League. Here's Berta with a statue called Shiba, modeled on a fellow student at the Art Students League. And on the left, you see a group photo from her class with Osip Zadkine, who was a French sculptor. He's here in the middle. And this is Berta. Osip Zadkine lived in Paris, but his father was Jewish, and so he spent the war years in New York. Okay. Here you see Berta with a sculpture, but it was not a medium she pursued much after studying with Zadkine. She said if she had another lifetime, you know. Okay. Berta made chronology her friend, right? Make chronology her friend. Berta made chronology her friend. She had a strong narrative sense. She loved to tell stories to me and others about the family, about her youth, about many things. And Chronos was kind to her in turn. Her life was largely stable and steady. But she also kept company with less linear ways of seeing time. Like Virginia Woolf, time was one of her great subjects. Besides her few early works in sculpture, her media were 2-dimensional: drawings, paintings, prints. Each work is seen right away, all at once. But many of these works, which take a moment to see, play tricks with moments, play tricks with time. Some works depict simultaneity, the multiple experiences of a given moment, experiences of different people, or of a divided person, let's say portrayed twice in an image. Or the work juxtaposes past and present. Or the work portrays tremendous motion, sometimes very fast or very prolonged motion. Stilled, the work stops time. Berta repeatedly put time into flat space, the 4th dimension into the 2nd. In her art, Berta befriended time. I'll give you examples of what I mean. Berta often pursued a series, sometimes over decades. Here are 3 works in the series Children at the Fair. The first work she made is an intaglio on the left, and she made this in 1950 after seeing a whirligig ride at a Midwestern state fair. Then in the middle, we see a woodcut from 1987. And then on the far right, we see a painting, Children at the Fair number 2, also from 1987. This repeated composition shows time stopped, the spinning children frozen, even as the abstract swirls and contrasting colors suggest movement. They make the work seem to vibrate. And this series demonstrates to you the evolution of Berta's style From her 20s onward, Bertie blended realism with abstraction, often in a single work, and saw no conflict between the approaches. In her 20s and 30s, she applied paint thickly and used dark colors. In the 60s, she started using brighter color, and she would apply pigment straight from the tube onto the canvas, which facilitated very clean, fine lines. Her printmaking, like her painting, evolved towards more precise lines. You can see that comparing the two prints here. Her early woodcuts have a rough look, and her later ones, and her many wood engravings as well, have sharply defined details. We can see not only the change from rough to fine line, but also the change from a darker palette to bright saturated colors. As a child, I saw these three works regularly. The intaglio and the painting hung in my parents' living room and the woodcut in their dining room. I could see how my grandmother repeatedly revisited a structure even as her approach evolved. In my grandparents' house, as in my parents' house, Bertie's art hung in every room, art from all periods of her life. The effect of this spatial compression of Bertie's career was that I had a sense of both evolution and continuity. I also had the sense of many decades happening at once, the past and present hung together on the wall. My experience of the art mirrored the art's argument about the expansiveness of time, its ability to slow down or speed up or contain multitudes or wrinkle. And here is an example of simultaneity and past and present. This is a painting called After the War from 1947. The Children at the Fair series pauses spinning children. It stills a moment. Elsewhere, Bertie's work suggests the multiplicity of a moment, the variety of experiences lived at the same time. After the War was painted when she was studying at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And this is representative of her early style. Large sculptural figures, geometric slabs of color, the use of gesture to create emotion. She was working in the vein of the German expressionists and of some of her teachers. Zadkine, also Ben Shahn, George Grosz, she studied with, and Francis de Erdely, a Hungarian artist about whom I'll have more to say later. On the right, we see a joyful pianist in a bold red whose elongated hands play with such energy that the piano keys jump and plant. And then on the left, we see a grim, gray group, a mother with a baby and a boy, as solid and cylindrical as a statue in a nave. And I'm very conscious walking around Oxford, you have many, many statues in naves, and they are similar. The boy holds his palm up, seeking something from the pianist. Food, money, borrowed joy, borrowed relief. The title, After the War, suggests that this group may be refugees from Europe. We see the contrasting experiences of the post-war moment in America. And we see not only simultaneity, but also the past entering the present. The suffering caused by the war makes demands after the war. In this painting, there's an attempt at interaction. The boy appeals to the pianist. Elsewhere, Bertie portrays people not interacting, but inhabiting different mental worlds, different places, and different times. This intaglio is called Self-Portrait with Parents. It's a mix of etching and soft ground, and it was cut in 1949 when Bertie was at the University of Iowa, and then printed a bit later. Oh, and I should say, all the works I'm showing are held by the Golahny estate unless the caption says otherwise. So this is held at the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Montreal. In this image, excuse me, in this image, we see industrial imagery of Detroit on the right. And we see a railing, a lamp, a newspaper wrap that would all have been made by Gad. These are examples of her father's ironwork. Gad and Fanny, the artist's parents, look saddened by what they're reading in the newspaper that Gad is holding. We can't tell a name of the newspaper from this image, it's not given, but in real life, Gad and Fanny subscribed to the Freie Arbeiterstimme, the Free Voice of Labor, which was a Yiddish anarchist paper that throughout the war reported on the destruction of the Jews. So we see that American industry and creation contrasts with the loss and devastation going on in Europe. Each person is in his or her own space, literally, which hints at their private interior space. While Gad and Fanny make a little rounded world, the home, the artist, looming much larger than them, turns the other direction, outward, beyond the frame, away from home, away from Detroit, towards the future. The parents are pained, the artist is determined. She is setting out. As in After the War, this composition works by juxtaposing figures who represent past and present, Europe and America. But here the composition suggests a moment beyond itself, the future where the artist is headed. And where did the artist go? She created her own domestic world. This woodcut from 1962 is called Portrait of the Artist. And I've always understood it as a double self-portrait, with my grandmother, large and central, recognizably herself, and then again, small and simplified in the upper right, with her two young children looking on. The mother is watching the artist. Two selves coexisting in the frame as in life. And here I have to talk a bit about the practicalities of Bertie's time. My mother says that when Bertie had young children, she was always fighting for time. Yes, and this painting suggests the fight. Though I recognize Bertie's features here, I never saw her look so severe. And my grandfather, in fact, used to remark on this discrepancy. He would say, she was always making herself look so gloomy. Maybe she expressed in her art feelings that she did not express in relationships. This woodcut is part of a decade's flourishing in that medium. When the duties of motherhood impeded painting time during the day, she would pursue printmaking in the evening. Because painting required daylight, printmaking did not. So after the children had gone to bed, she would do printmaking. And so throughout the 50s, she made woodcuts. She also made some paintings, but many more woodcuts. I love this anecdote, which shows that art can flourish despite constraints and even because of them, like verse in a set form. I think of it alongside Sylvia Plath writing poetry at 4 a.m. when her children were sleeping. It is an anecdote about time allocation. And in thinking back through my mother's, I am often searching for models of time allocation. I have not, I should say, successfully followed my grandmother's example. I am too tired in the evening, typically, to do much work. But still, I like this story. Bertie too looked for models of time allocation. When she was 18, she wrote in her diary about an anti-model. Can you see that? Yeah, you can just see that. Okay. I gathered that Tekla was an impressionistic painter, mostly of flowers, when very young. At 18, she became a devout communist and married. Now she has practically given up painting. That's a choice that every woman artist must make when the crisis arrives. Not only then, but all through life, conditions arise which cause a conflict in you between the woman and the artist. I don't know the future, but I do know I cannot live without drawing. Bertie was not Tekla. Here is a woodcut called The Bud. It's a flower, but not an impressionistic one. Bertie is a mother to 2 young children, ages 7 and 5, and she makes this print. That is totally joyful, unlike the self-portrait of the divided mother artist. This awakening flower woman is a celebration of fertility and development. Bertie describes it at the bottom in pencil as a handprint. What this means is before she owned a press of her own, she would ink the wood block, lay paper on top of it, and rub it all over with a wooden spoon to get the impression. So many of her woodcuts are handprints. In this particular case, she's also inking the block. You can see behind the flower woman that the block itself has been inked. She's getting the grain of the wood behind the flower woman so that the bud seems really to emerge from wood or from a tree or near a tree. And so here she's capturing emergence, a process, all at once. Again, the 4th dimension, time in the 2nd dimension. Bertie had written about the conflict between the woman and the artist. Bertie addressed this by setting up her life to make the most of time. Besides her parents, her husband was the great enabler of her art. Yuda supported her emotionally and materially. He was the breadwinner. He worked long hours as an electrical engineer. He also threw himself into the practical side of Bertie's career. He made wooden frames for her art, such as the one you see here. He photographed each piece to turn them into slides, and he maintained a spreadsheet of the work. With Yuda's salary, the couple could afford a small house outside Boston. In this house, Bertie had 2 studios, a painting studio with abundant natural light, and a printing studio where, as of 1966, she had her own printing press, a very large flatbed press called a Meeker McPhee press. So she had money and a room of her own, indeed 2 rooms of her own. The diary entry I quoted continued, all through life, conditions arise which cause a conflict in you between the woman and the artist. To me, as a child, being surrounded by Bertie's art from all times of her life gave me the impression of inevitability. Of course she had made all this. Here it was. Here she was. To a grandchild, everything that a grandparent has achieved and experienced has the patina of history, the roundedness of a narrative arc. But no one's life is inevitable. Bertie had not known that she would live to be a grandmother or that she would be able to pursue her art as she did. The crisis did arrive more than once. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in her 30s. Her father had a severe stroke. The time that she had, she gave to her art and to her close relationships. There was no wasted time. Okay, returning to this. We see here that the artist's face looks anguished, but I'm not sure that the cause of the anguish is this fact of 2 identities, mother and artist. Bertie made many works in which she stares out with concern, surrounded by faces and bodies in various groupings and situations. And sometimes these faces and bodies are those of family, and sometimes they're not. The artist's own face is always surveying the range of human life with a sort of watchful care. And this work, where she features herself staring out, surrounded by various people, culminated in prints and paintings in the series Landscape of Man in the Nuclear Age. Just a sec, I'll get more water. I think of this series as a nuclear Wernicke. This series is characterized by a vertical column of heads in which the topmost head, oh, can I do this? So you can see it better? Yeah, there we go. Okay. No, that's not good. Anyway, okay. The series is characterized by a vertical column of heads in which the topmost head is modeled on Bertie's own in both of these. And always there is a central head with closed eyes. Bertie wrote about this central head. This introverted head with tightly closed eyes cannot tolerate the idea of impending cataclysm. Flanking the column are two hands that shield people from danger. And in the print here, which is a copper engraving, we see an eagle descending to pluck up a mother and child here. And there is also the danger of the flames of a nuclear catastrophe here. Flames and gaseous shapes. All is churning amidst symmetry. While the eagle descends on the right in the print, there is a phoenix who ascends on the left. So here's the eagle, here's the phoenix, and the phoenix is rising from the ashes of tangled bodies, which are imagery from the Holocaust. The painting that you see here is one of three made around the same time as the copper engraving. The copper engraving is held at Vassar, the Loeb Art Center. In the painting, the loose and flowing brushwork in saturated pigment suggests the frantic heat and fear and energy of the people. Bertie puts everything in 20th century horrors, a range of vulnerable people, various attitudes towards the danger, death and rebirth, protection and destruction. The title of the series names the effort to put time into space. This is a landscape of an age. Bertie explored not only 20th century history, but also the much longer time scale of the history of the universe. Starting in the 1970s, after a visit to the Sinai Desert, Bertie depicted the evolution of the cosmos, which she saw as parallel to the creative process. She did this first in a series on the creation of the world as told in the Hebrew Bible. And this is called the Genesis series. She painted each of the 7 days 3 times and made related prints. Here on the left, we see day 1, when in the Hebrew Bible we read that God separated darkness from light. Later, Bertie approached the same topic from a scientific angle. From popular science books, she gathered that the shape of the Big Bang was a deep 3-dimensional V, ever expanding at the top. That's what you see here. She recasts this shape over and over in the series Being and Becoming. As in the bud, she's capturing a process, a development. Here, the largest, fastest process of all. A happy accidental geometry links these two paintings. While Being and Becoming represents the Big Bang as an upside-down triangle, Genesis Day 1 shows the creation of the universe, separation of darkness and light, as a sideways triangle, which Bertie intuited before reading that the Big Bang formed a V. I quite like that. First, the V is a separation of darkness and light, then the V is the Big Bang. We have complementary representations of the originary moment. Biblical time and cosmic time frame human time. In this Being and Becoming, cosmic spheres morph as we go up into human heads. And at the top, we have the words, "we are." In a related print, a full sentence is given. It says, "We are part of a cosmic mind." I haven't found a source for this sentence. I think it is Bertie's own. We are part of a cosmic mind. To Bertie, the human imagination participates in the ongoing creation of the universe. Bertie was also interested in time as it functioned in Jewish history. You saw a bit of that with the Holocaust imagery. She was interested in time as it functioned in Jewish history and in the Jewish tradition. And now in closing, I have to tell you about an important moment in her education. When she was 18, living at home in Detroit, she was studying drawing with Francis de Erdely. He lived from 1904 to 1959. He was a Hungarian artist who had to leave his native Hungary because his art got him into trouble with the Gestapo. His art was against Nazism and fascism. De Erdely came to the US in 1939, and Golahny was studying with him in 1943. De Erdely felt it the artist's responsibility to depict the socially marginalized, laborers, immigrants, the poor, and this view influenced my grandmother. In 1943, a few months before she went to New York to study at the Art Students League, she begins a diary, and it's from this diary that there's the passage about Tekla, who became a communist and stopped painting flowers. And here is this is from the first entry. The first passage here is from the first entry in the diary. I am grateful to de Erdely. If there is any communication between our souls, thank you for your interest, guidance, and advice for New York. And here she switches to addressing herself. First, she uses the second person to speak to de Erdely. Then she's going to use the second person speaking to herself, repeating what de Erdely said to her, telling herself his advice. So she says, remember that you are an individual. And if you do not bring forth the Jew as such, you will alienate and antagonize no one, and you will be accepted for what you are. I am young and healthy. Now she turns to the first person. I am young and healthy with untiring industry, carrying the right values ever before me. Forget background, tradition. I am me. On that shall I rest. She records similar advice in one of her last entries before heading to New York. A few months later, this is September 1st, 1943. De Erdely asked me to write him. He'll get me contact with dealers. As he walked me downstairs, he said softly, forget your tradition. I forgot my tradition because I found it held me back from seeing a clearer picture. And so goodbye, and maybe I will see you in New York. I hope so. Well, my grandmother did not take de Erdely's advice. In her art, she held on to her individuality, but drew also on the larger people to which she belonged. Judaism did not hold her back. It helped her to see a clear picture. Her art depicts Jewish rituals, such as Shabbat candles or a prayer shawl, a talit. She also depicted Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, Israel, the biblical Psalms, and as you see, the biblical creation of the world. This is Genesis day 7, when we read that God rests after completing the work of creation. And this is the origin of the Sabbath, or Shabbat, the day of rest. paintings and print, Bertie befriended many ways of seeing time. Simultaneity, past and present, process. She befriended time as it functions in the artist's life, the human and animal life cycle, 20th century history, the cosmos, and the Hebrew Bible. Virginia Woolf writes of the cathedral space of childhood. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel writes, the Sabbath is a cathedral in time. If I triangulate between these two statements, I arrive at childhood as the Sabbath, a period of sanctified time. This is indeed what my childhood often felt like, thanks in part to my grandmother's art. And now, as an adult reflecting on this art, I assuage and clarify and focus my own concern about limited time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. So we open the floor to questions. Anyone would like to start off with a question to Emily?
Do you want
Well, we both start.
Okay,
We
sure.
both start.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Rebecca.
Rebecca?
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I enjoyed it so much. It's so interesting at so many different levels. I was very struck by the fact that you said she used wood. She made woodcuts a lot. She was very interested in woodcuts
Woodcuts and engraving.
and engravings. And I wondered whether again, it was interesting to reflect on whether there might be a connection between her choice of that medium and her interest in time, because of course wood is a medium that comes out as made by time. And I wondered if she ever wrote about that or spoke about that or talked about the choice of medium in that way.
Oh, that's lovely. I have not found her writing specifically about time in connection to the woodblock. She does write a lot. She does. I do have certain writings of hers, often, I mean, almost always done because of an exhibition. You know, what is your artist statement, or could you caption this painting? And so I do have often certain descriptions of her work or her process, and also because she taught, I have teaching notes. Although she taught painting, not printmaking. So I know she does write a bit about the woodblock, but not specifically in connection to time. Yeah.
At this point, did she write that she was concerned about time above all else in any of her written work?
So the only publication that the only publication of hers in her lifetime was a short essay. She was invited to write about, well, I'll show you. It's in Leonardo, the art magazine Leonardo. It's about this painting, which I love. It's the Crab Nebula. She wrote a very short article called How I Came to Paint the Crab Nebula. And there she talks about the visit to the Sinai Desert and making studies of the cosmos and looking at photographs from the Harvard College Observatory and reading about the Big Bang and reading about time and seeing, she says explicitly, she saw the process of creation as ongoing and as part of the artistic process. So that is explicit in that art.
In this particular,
For this particular painting.
Thank you very much for the very inspiring lecture. I was wondering about the artist's political views and how they could inform her work, because you mentioned that her parents, for example, were interested in the anarchist ideas, and they were apparently right if they were subscribed to this anarchist newspaper, and that they were this. I know that many Jewish community, including my own family, in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, there was a lot of interest towards communism, anarchist ideas, like different ideas. And yeah, I was wondering what was her view on this, and is it somehow connected with art?
Thank you. So she did not write explicitly about political views, Much of her art shows people suffering, people in extremis, for a variety of reasons, some of them due to political situations. So work on the Korean War, or the Holocaust, or refugees. This specific thinker whom her family admired politically was named Rudolf Rocker. Rudolf Rocker he lived in London for many years, writing and editing a Jewish newspaper, whose name is escaping me at the moment. Here he is. There he is. And he was an anarchist who believed in what was called propaganda not by the deed, as opposed to propaganda by the deed, which meant destruction, violence. So propaganda not by the deed meant not violent, non-violent spreading of anarchist ideals. So that's an important aspect of his thought. My grandmother's parents were friends with him. She was friendly with him, but she herself did not specifically write what she thought politically, that I have found.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, I'll come back to you in a minute.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how your grandmother sort of fits into the mid-century, related mid-century American art world? What
Can you speak up a little?
yeah, were there other painters that she affiliated herself with or was particularly interested in, or were there fashions or trends that she was critical of? Were there people that she exhibited with multiple times? To do that, I also wondered, given the focus on time, about whether she took photographs. And so we saw photographs of whether that's a type of art that she practiced.
In the Boston art world, she was, there's an article called Recognition and Renown: The Survival of Artistic Reputation, by a couple named Lang and Lang. And they distinguish between recognition, that is recognition by your peers, awards within an art exhibition, or being well known within a peer group, a fellow artist, whereas renown is a more public recognition, celebration. She had recognition, she never had renown. And so the people whom she exhibited with, or the people who recognized her art, were mostly in the Boston art world. And some are well known in the Boston art world, but perhaps not at a larger scale. One fellow is Martin Baruchian. I could name other artist friends. She had many artist friends, but they're not, bold names. And she never had a steady dealer. And she was she wanted to do her work and would go often to exhibitions, but was not specifically in the school of someone or in a group of other artists. She took photos of the family, but not more than that, not as an art form. Yeah.
Maybe as an extension to what you asked, at which point was she recognized enough to be collected by all the museums and art centers that we mentioned earlier? How did that come about?
Yeah, there are different paths for the acquisition of sometimes something. It was in a private collection, and then the collection is given as a gift to the museum, or in her lifetime, she gave a few gifts to collections that had done an exhibition of her work. That was the case at Harvard, for instance. They did a show of her work. She gave them a gift of a print. And now my family is in the process of interesting museums in acquisition of select work. Precisely.
She has done very well that so much of her work has been appreciated. Was it mostly after her death?
Maybe half and half.
Yeah, half and half. That's as good as one can expect. Well, good artists, but only appreciate after the death. Speaking of world renowned artists. Yeah.
Hello, a question about the sort of double portrait of you as granddaughter writing and as art historian, cultural historian, piecing together what would be known to the outside world. I just wondered if there were things of tension in those experiences, and also how much of what you've shown us and interpreted for us you would have been able to do were you not sitting in the same room in the grandmother, sharing the same world and being told things. Like, how much of this is private?
Yeah. Well, I want to write, like your question gets at the core of the project, which is I want to write a book that only I can write with the knowledge I have of the art, with my stories about the art. There's extensive documentation about certain works. You know, I mentioned the Crab Nebula, or her exhibition notes. It is my hope that others, there is an excellent scholarly article on her work in Woman's Art Journal by an art historian, Abigail McGibbity. My hope is that others are interested in the art and write on it from a non-personal perspective and find their own things to say about it. But I think it's the advantage of my project to bring what I know to bear. My relationship with my grandmother was easy. It was close. It was good. This is not the rough spots of the story are, I think, her early life, how she in fact, her whole life. How does she have the energy to keep doing this despite not tremendous, not renown, and despite the advice of de Erdely, what is it? How does she respond to certain challenges? And then also the story as it is today, where she's, now what? To achieve some greater recognition so that her art should be known, it should be seen, it should be preserved. This is sort of a bit of a rough spot, and it's a very happy thing for me to call attention to the art, but I want to do it well, and I want it to be successful, and so that's a bit of an itchiness, I would say. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Very much. Yeah. Thank you so much. Anyone else? A question to Emily? Michelle, after.
Well, it's very interesting, and I just love your grandmother's art. I see that you have more slides that you haven't shown us yet. I wonder if there's anything from these slides that you'd like to highlight.
Is that your question? Let's see. Here's at the Met. The Met has one print. The Met has the tiger. This is Blake's tiger. Tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? Bertie was commissioned to illustrate a broadside of the tiger, and this, in fact, was her first wood engraving. She had never tried wood engraving. She did a lot of woodcuts, and she tried wood engraving to illustrate. It's really very small. I mean, it's a poetry broadside, and so she wanted to get really fine detail in a really small space. And boxwood is a really dense wood and very good for this. So she thought, okay, I'll try. So she tried for the first time wood engraving on boxwood, and she loved it. And so then she made many other prints in this medium. So that's one example. And I don't know. Should I show more? Another question?
Yeah, Michelle.
Oh, I thought you were going to show us more.
No? What do you want to do? Should I show you one more? Show you one more. Okay, this is okay. This painting on the right is called Concentration Camp. And on the left, this is a statue by Zadkine, her teacher of sculpture at the Art Students League. I cannot prove this. This is my own intuition. I don't have a record of this, but I think that Zadkine's, it's called Castor, this composition, this sort of eviscerated body with the upturned head, was an influence on the main figure in concentration camp number 1. I could be wrong. as early as, as early as 1946, my grandmother was drawing pictures based on images she had seen of the Holocaust. But it was only later in her life that she made, ambitious paintings on the theme. And this is one such painting.
It's very interesting you should say that, because it goes in parallel with lots of survivors, which she wasn't, that they needed time before they could speak, and she needed time to reflect on what she had seen. This piece was made in 85, so it was many, many years afterwards, which is an interesting point. Michelle?
I love this phrase, when the crisis comes, when the crisis arrives, this phrase occurs. And it seems to me that there's a crisis of being a woman and everything that entails. And then there's the crisis of her historical moment. And then the third crisis, which you set up so beautifully in your talk, of this choice that's so, straight out of Israel's annual, the melting pot choice. You're going to blend in, prefigured in George Eliot's Daniel Deronda, it's the eternal dilemma. And the way you staged that for us, and no, she did not. And so I feel like there's, in those three crises, the motor of a very relevant, dare I say, relatable, story that would, I think, would have a readership in this day and age and in this moment. And I hope you'll continue. It's really fascinating. Thank you.
That's wonderful to hear. That's great. Thank you, Michelle.
Kate, I'll come back to you in a minute. There's a lady who raised her hand before you.
I just wanted to ask, now that you're immersing yourself in your grandmother's wonderful work, whether there are particular things you wish you had asked or you wish you could. I'm sure there's a list of 100, but I wondered whether there's anything that you so wish that you could speak to her about now.
There is so much. And there's so much. And of course, I was 20 and I was all excited about archival research I was working at the Beinecke Library at Yale. That was my job. And I was so excited about Authors Archive. And then every once in a while I had my grandmother on the phone. It was like a totally different, it didn't even occur to me that, I could ask her questions. Mostly I would have asked her about her early life and written it down. And in fact, she told me stories, but I didn't write them down. The time at the Art Students League, she's 18 and she's in New York City, and it's the middle of the war. That's such a rich time. I would love to have heard, I would have loved to record her on that or written down what she said. And then Iowa and the Art Institute, really the early, when I said, here, I'm going to give you a chronology of her life, and really it was just 25 years of her life, and she lived till 80. It's sort of, the plot points come early, and then it's quite steady. But having said that, that's not wholly true. I would have also liked to ask her about the breast cancer diagnosis and how her art related to that. And I would have, so that's something.
Did she make art around her illness?
There is, I'm not sure. I need to think about it more. Not obviously.
No.
Yeah.
Kate.
So this is so rich. Thank you so much. I go to that annoying Oxford thing where you just say something that is definitely not a question. Although I would really love to know if you know anything more about Osip Zadkina, because I've just finished writing a book which ends with a piece of his that no one's ever seen.
Oh.
I know, how cool is that? But so, and it's to do with time and movement and holding it static. And so it's incredible to see this work and to see her there in a photo with him. So in 1939, I think, 1937, he was near Rotterdam and he was on a beach with a wonderful, brilliant cellist and composer who was Jewish. And made a maquette out of the mud and the sand, which was never going to last, of this man playing and the movement and the shape that he made with the instrument. He was then killed in 44, and obviously Zadkina went to America. But then there is, and so this thing only exists in a family photo that no one's seen apart from the family, and this man has vanished, and so does his instrument now.
say something of the movement and the shapes of the
Wow.
scales held in this incredible kind of temporary moment. But then all through his career, Zakin seems to have made sculptures that are very similar in bronze, a little bit like that, but of a man with a cello, which are really, really similar to this early sort of snapshot in just in the sand on the beach.
Wow.
And yeah, I just wonder whether what you know about him, because I only know very little, having to find out a bit, having had this photograph. But there is something that someone with your brilliance could tease out about the momentariness of it, and about people who are erased, or lives that are erased, or the way that art can capture something of movement in something that is still, and the way that even that isn't still in time, it evaporates. It was never meant to last. Whereas, of course, sculpture in bronze really is. So there's something, yeah. I don't know. Over to you.
Wow, I mean,
Yes,
so
wonderful.
wow,
Connection.
that is amazing. Well,
I've never had anyone mention him. I only kind of
oh,
did a sort of rabbit hole dive on his work because I was given this photograph. So
wow, that's
don't know
amazing.
anything
And
about
I mean, far from being like any annoying Oxford thing, that is well, just very incredible and wonderful. Yes, the fleetingness of any work of art in sand. I mean, the whole thing. That's as an anticipation of what will happen to the man. It's too much. It's so much. There are good publications of Zakin. He published an autobiography. He wrote about his time in New York, in fact, which is useful for me. He doesn't write about his students. No, it would have been nice to say.
I have a feeling he was bought. His works were bought by Peggy Guggenheim, but I have to double check.
Oh, okay.
Because somehow I wrote a paper of Peggy Guggenheim as the patron of. I think I have to double check, but I think was he, as far as you're concerned, in the art world in New York when he fled Europe?
I mean, he was already quite established and respected. Yeah. That's how he was able to come to New York and have this teaching job.
Did he escape Europe with Varian Price help? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know the channel. I don't know the channel. There is a musée Zakin in Paris. It's a wonderful. You've probably been. Okay, yeah. So they'll know more. They'll have.
They didn't know anything about it.
Okay. Well, there you go. We'll talk after. Yeah, that is wonderful.
We still have a little bit of time. Anyone would like to address another question? No?
Show us more pictures.
That's fine.
What did you say?
I said, show us more pictures.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll show you one more slide. Oh, where did it go? I'll show you 3 versions of Genesis Day 1. You see, she did each of the 7 days of creation 3 times. So here we have.
Do you know why 3 times? Is there a particular reason?
No, I think she was so interested. She kept going, and I mean, you can't do like half the series. You have to do the whole. So she did.
And I had 3 of the same.
Yeah, she did 3 series. I think she had many ideas of how to do each one, and then she did it 3 times. Well, that's enough. I don't know. I don't have more than that, but. So you see the first one, it's a very clear triangle, which I compared to the triangle of the Big Bang in the painting Being and Becoming. And then in the subsequent ones, it's like the triangle melts. The triangle melts into the color. Darkness and light is less and less separated.
Can you show us this picture?
Oh, so here
right next to her to see the size.
Yeah. Well, oh yes, of course. Sure. Well, anyway, look, here's the painting, and here is my grandmother with the painting. This was for a journalist was interviewing her at her home, so the journalist took this photo. So you have a sense of the scale. My grandmother next to the painting, and all the works in the series are the same size.
The Genesis series.
The Genesis series, yeah, I think a few might be a slightly different size, but most of them are the same. Yeah.
You say Amy Golahny.
My mother is Amy Golahny, and she is an art historian. She is a scholar of Rembrandt in particular.
One more question there.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation.
I wondered from a craft point of view, your first monograph or one of your monographs is about Virginia Woolf and writing about visual art as opposed to writing. How did you make that switch? What kind of tools are you using that are different? How do you switch registers?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really big and important question. I am learning. I mean, I took courses in art history. I took some courses in art history. And I'm learning as I go. Some things I know just by virtue of spending time with my grandmother, and also we have her library. So I know which artists she's looking at, and I can read in her own books about art history, about various techniques. But it is new for me to be writing about visual art. So that's it. We'll see how it goes. Well, having said that, I should say one thing. I have an article coming out about Vanessa Bell. So I will have one article that will come out that's about visual art. That's not about my group. Thank you for that. It's yeah, I'm figuring it out.
Was there someone who put up their hand just as this? No? So maybe we come to the end, and thank you so much on behalf of everyone. It was a splendid presentation. And maybe one day we'll see you again.
That would be a pleasure. This was tremendously helpful for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.